I'm Mike Paterakis. I'm the Vice President of the New York Financial Writers Association, and I'm really thrilled to welcome you to tonight's event, AI, Journalism, the Future of Financial Reporting is the title of tonight's event. Artificial intelligence is no longer just a futuristic concept. It's here to stay with us, actively transforming the way we report, analyze, and deliver financial news. Um, as journalists, we have to ask, how do we harness AI's capabilities, but without compromising accuracy, ethics, or our own role in storytelling? Um, as you guys know, to help us tackle these questions, we have two incredible experts with us. First, Jonathan Soma, a professor at Columbia Journalism School who specializes in making unapproachable data accessible. Soma has spent years helping journalists translate complex data sets into compelling narratives, an increasingly critical skill in the age of AI. And we're also joined by Zach Seward, the New York Times editorial director of artificial intelligence initiatives. Zach, I hope I didn't mispronounce your last name. Zach is at the forefront of integrating AI into journalism, ensuring that the Times newsroom can take advantage of this technology while maintaining its journalistic integrity. So tonight we're going to explore how AI is being used in financial journalism, what opportunities and challenges it presents, and how we as journalists can stay ahead of the curve. We will begin with a discussion, and we're going to follow with the Q&A session. Jonathan, want to take it from here?
Let's have Zach go first so that he can give some examples, and then I'll sweep in later and I'll say, if you don't work at the Times, here's some ways you can approach this stuff.
Absolutely. Let's do that.
That sounds perfect. Thank you, Mike, and everyone at NYFWA, and I'm getting the acronym wrong, but I'll NYFWA. All right.
NYFWA, yeah. How?
Amazing. It's fun for me to be here because well, for a lot of reasons, but one is before joining the Times in December 2023, I was for about a dozen years working at Quartz, which is a business news outlet and business journal. And before that, I was at the Wall Street Journal, and business journalism is near and dear to my heart. Although the examples I'll be talking about today are not strictly, certainly financial or business journalism examples. I think they ought to be. They're relevant enough to, I think, everyone's interests here. So as Mike said, I'm Zach Seward. What editorial director for AI initiatives means at the Times is that I lead a five-person team based in our newsroom that's comprised, in addition to me, of two machine learning engineers, a designer, and an editor, all of us coming from various different backgrounds in journalism and media, and then bringing various more specific skill sets to the table in order to help us do a variety of things, prototype ideas related to how AI could be used in the service of creating the report or serving our readers, building internal tools to help do and make easier some of the types of work I'll be talking about today, setting standards and principles for how the Times intends to use and just as crucially not use AI in our work. And various related other things. I give a lot of internal presentations, talking to our colleagues in the newsroom about what's possible, the tools we make available internally at the Times, and how to use them. Trying to help people just start thinking about where AI may fit in their day to day. Not really trying to push the technology on anyone. I like to say, you're more likely to know where the problems are in your day-to-day work, with the challenges you face, and of course what you're trying to accomplish in the first place. And we try to just provide the right tools for people to accomplish those goals. Sometimes AI is of use. Oftentimes, it's not. But of course, today we're talking about when times that AI has been of use, and specifically an area that I'm particularly bullish on when I think about the potential for AI in our field of journalism. I really think in the at least short, probably medium term, that the greatest impact we're likely to see, in the positive sense at least, when it comes to AI for journalism, is aiding research and investigations, and potentially opening up whole new uh, domains for reporting and investigation that really weren't possible to consider previously, because the scale of the challenge was too great. But now that's honestly no longer true. But before we get to those examples, I think it's important to talk about the principles that we've set for the use of AI at the Times, and these principles are publicly available on our website, for well, actually in longer version than you see here on the slide. We unveiled them internally at the Times in March of last year, just as I was getting up to speed, and starting to fill out that team. But before any work was, with generative AI was starting to be done, at least in the time in the newsroom at the Times. And we tried to write these principles with an eye toward longevity. We're talking about a technology where there's something new every day, every week. We, by definition, are encountering novel challenges, including novel questions of ethics and standards. Basically, every time we use AI. And so it felt important to write up some principles that wouldn't be that we wouldn't need to rewrite every time there's some new model or application of the technology came out, that we, could, well, we needed, of course, to keep up with new developments. We didn't want the sand, the floor beneath our feet to be shifting at all times when it comes to the standards that we set for it. So as you're seeing on screen, the principles are threefold. We committed, one, to only ever use AI as a tool in service of our mission. The keywords there are tool and mission. We're in control when using AI, and so we starting with the choice of whether to use it at all. And we're only interested in employing it in service of existing overall mission of the Times, to help our readers uncover the truth and understand the world, or in service of more specific goals that the Times has. With a research and development type team like mine, there's always a risk of being like an AI hammer that sees nails everywhere. And we really try to take the opposite approach, where we're interviewing our colleagues, talking to them about their hopes and dreams and problems, challenges. And as I said before, AI often is not the answer to any of those challenges, but sometimes it is. And when it is, then we get to work. And when we get to work, principle number two is immediately important, which is our commitment to using AI always with human guidance and review. It's not possible to hold a machine to account. We, as journalists, are always ever responsible for what we report, however the report is created. We don't blame Microsoft Excel for a formula error that we may have made in a calculation that ends up in an article and forces a correction. That's on us. And so too, when it comes to the use of AI in the background, when we're using AI, we try to design the system itself such that, well, one, we're designing it. Two, we are able to observe and analyze what's happening at all points, so that the analysis is what we intended it to be. And then, at the end of the day, employing the same traditional methods we would for any other type of reporting to fact check the output that might be coming from a large language model or other type of machine learning tool. And then lastly, we committed to do, as we do with all of our journalism, this kind of work as transparently and ethically as possible. What that generally has meant is, well, these principles are publicly available. We also have a more detailed disclosure on our site, part of the Trust Teams hub that helps explain various different ways the Times goes about its work. And that's important for readers to see. A lot of readers are curious, of course, about how AI is and isn't being used. We want to be clear about ways we absolutely have no intention of using AI. Like we are not using AI to write articles and have zero interest in doing that. And we are crystal clear with readers about that. In fact, our bet is that over time, the value of our human reported, vetted, written journalism is going to go up if the rest of the internet fills up with AI generated slop, where it's difficult to tell what's the provenance of the information. And then when there's more specific uses, like in some of the examples I'll share right now, we also publish more detailed methodologies of what exactly went into putting together this story, as we'd often do with all sorts of other types of data journalism that don't involve AI. And now that we've been doing this for some time, the one thing we've found to be the most repeatable pattern is there's kind of like a holy trinity when it comes to using AI at least for investigative projects in our newsroom. But I think this really applies more broadly for the use of generative AI in all sorts of domains. And that's the mixture of more traditional coding, even if that just means structuring your data in a spreadsheet. But like we all know, dealing with messy data sets often requires some preparation in the first place, and so too in these examples. And then pairing that with AI and, crucially, expertise. In our world of journalism, AI alone is basically worthless. But frequently we find that pairing a journalist who's been on the same beat for 2 decades and knows the ins and outs of their beat with an LLM or other AI tool can be a really powerful combination. So let me talk about a few examples of how that's played out recently at the Times. When President Trump was inaugurated, as you all know, he set out to fill out his cabinet, many members of which were plucked right from television news. In particular, Pete Hegseth, who is, of course, a Fox News anchor, and Tulsi Gabbard, who, well, not an anchor, was appearing on television pretty much constantly for the prior several years. Say what you will of the merits of putting together a cabinet from TV. For us as reporters, seemed like a great opportunity to aid in the vetting of the cabinet nominees, as we always do when a new president's elected and nominates their cabinet. But in this case, we had so much more material to pour over than we typically would, because these, all of their appearances on Fox and other outlets were available to us. So that was the good news. The bad news was it was a lot. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of hours of video to pour through in order to find, relevant material, which in the case of Tulsi Gabbard was conspiracies that she'd had about the deep state or previous statements she'd made sympathetic to Russia and other adversaries of the US. Or in the case of Pete Hegseth, how he'd spoken quite publicly and openly about his love of alcohol and his drinking habits. And so both of those were like important stories for us to pursue, and AI was extremely helpful. One, in creating transcripts of the videos in the first place. So we had raw video. It was much easier to work with text transcripts of those videos. Two, in the case of Gabbard, because she wasn't a host, it was actually kind of difficult just from the transcripts alone to distinguish between references to Tulsi Gabbard and times when she was the one speaking, and we only cared about what she was the one speaking. So we used computer vision to look at the thumbnail images from the videos and identify or ask a model to identify when she was on screen, and then assume that that's that part of the transcript can be attributed to her. And then crucially, we used an LLM or large language model to go methodically through each of these transcripts at looking for topics of interest. Again, conspiracies about the deep state, references to Russia, Syria, and so on. Really, we wrote really detailed prompts that benefited from the expertise of the reporters we were working with, who had all of the background about Gabbard's past that we put straight into the prompt so that our model was had as much context as we had. And we're able to find a wide range of quotes that were relevant to the story you're looking at here on screen, as well as to a similar story that published ahead of Pete Hegseth's nomination, where we showed just how extensive he'd spoken and sort of brazenly he'd spoken about his drinking habits, to the point of being somewhat worrisome. Does a future defense secretary have a drinking problem? In the Hegseth example, the AI was particularly useful because, if we just wanted to use a control F keyword search for the word alcohol, we didn't, need AI for that. But Hegseth was not, often using the word alcohol, right? He was talking about how he was blitzed the night before, or about how wild and crazy his New Year's Eve party had been. Or in one particular case, there was this funny exchange where there was someone mentioned Hendrix, and his co-host is like, Jimi Hendrix, and Hegseth goes, no, I mean the other Hendrix, referring to the brand of gin, and even that kind of subtle reference to alcohol, not using any word related to alcohol, the model was able to pick up on, because basically the same reason ChatGPT can seemingly understand your what you're saying to it and spit out seemingly original prose, is also what allows essentially semantic search engines to understand the meaning behind text or images for that matter, and allow for that sort of needle in a haystack discovery that wouldn't be possible with traditional keyword searches. A similar process was useful a month or two into the Trump administration for a piece looking at how US government websites were changing in light of the administration's edicts to erase words like diversity, equity, and inclusion from government agency websites. Working with others in the newsroom, we took screenshots of thousands of government websites ahead of January 20th, and then in the weeks following January 20th, so that we could do a before and after comparison. But these were screenshots. So again, we used AI to extract the text from the screenshots. And if you're familiar with OCR technology, you know how you might upload a PDF and to just try to get the text out of it, you should know that today's large language models have made enormous advancements in OCR. I mean, this honestly was a pretty easy OCR challenge, but we also do work with like really messy handwritten documents where the accuracy level on them, you know, taking a photograph of handwritten notes and translating that to text is wildly impressive and makes, you know, it possible to do analysis on certain kinds of documents we just couldn't deal with previously. So that was step one. We then also, you know, used AI to help look for changes in words. And again, like if all we were looking for was the word diversity getting deleted from certain websites, we don't need AI for that. That was an easy one. But AI was helpful for identifying semantically similar, thematically similar language that we didn't know to look for, but was also getting erased from these websites. It was also particularly useful for handling government websites in languages other than English. And that's another area in which today's large language models are, you know, have made enormous advancements in translation that you know, that enable that kind of analysis that produced this piece, which you know, with the graphics team, which did a really great job presenting the findings, you know, really bluntly and succinctly in the way you see here on screen, was you know, a big hit with readers who were interested in this topic. And then my final example is not really an investigation, but I wanted to include it for two reasons. One, you know, this doesn't always have to be so serious, and two, the analysis in this case was actually much simpler and more, you know, something that I think anyone here could do on their own. So you may be familiar, the travel desk at the Times has an annual list called 52 Places to Go. As I learned in the process of doing this this work, it wasn't always 52 places, but they were celebrating their 20th anniversary this in January this year. It was the 20th version of the list, and as part of that, the Travel Desk wanted to go back over the prior 20 years of this series, and, you know, do a piece about trends in the list. You know, look at, there are various different things they wanted to examine, you know, obviously like what parts of the world and the United States had been recommended, and what states still haven't made the list. I think New Jersey, for some odd reason, has yet to make 52 places. But what we did is take the full archive, upload it to an LLM, and asked it to produce a report. You know, what trends do you see in the archive? And the idea here was just to give the reporter who was doing this work a starting place. Of course, she read through most of the archive herself, drew her own observations, and was a, you know, and did a lot of like much more sort of traditional reporting to produce the piece. But it was really helpful to have a starting place and basically like a sidekick or a helpful brainstorm at the beginning of the project before diving in to the rest of the work. For instance, you know, one thing that the large language model, you know, picked up on right away is that even though sustainable travel is a term that only emerged in the last 5 years or so, it's actually been a theme of the list and of, you know, tourism writ large for all 2 decades of 52 Places to Go. It's just, you know, it was able to see the different, you know, it was able to pick up on like references to ecotourism and green travel and so forth before the world coalesced around, you know, the word sustainability. And I should stress, in all of these cases that I'm talking about, the role that AI played was really in the middle of the process. As I've described, it was upfront work, like what we're trying to look for in the first place, collection of the data, and so forth. And then there was a use of AI to aid the reporting process. But at the end of the of each of these, we went all the way back to the original material, back to the actual video clips of Hegseth and Gabbard, to verify that our transcriptions were accurate, that we were quoting them fairly in the right context, and so forth. In this case, with 52 places, really didn't use any of the analysis from the LLM. Again, it was really just a starting point, a report, for the reporter to get started on her own work. So that's why we sometimes refer to that as human first and human last, and that's what that's really a repeatable pattern we find. But the AI in the middle makes a lot of these stories possible in the first place. We just couldn't consider or conceive of going through such an enormous archive of coverage, or such so many hundreds of hours of video without some assistance from a machine. Um, and the reason for all of that caution is, as I hope everyone on the call knows, there are all sorts of pitfalls you can run into when using AI and any kind of work, but certainly our kind of work, where like the margin for error should be zero. Um, as you probably know, generative AI can generate, or sometimes are referred to as hallucinations. I don't like that euphemism. They can bullshit you. They can lie. And we are a strict rule. We never trust output from an LLM. We or another way of putting it would be trust but verify. Maybe less well known is the fact that like the output from an LLM can often be mediocre, especially when not when it's not accompanied by really detailed instructions of what you're looking for. In the case of the 52 places investigation, the report we produced was not great. Like the end article was very good. The report was kind of like high school English students' best effort at going through the archive. Nothing against high schoolers, but but still, because the point was just to give you a starting place, like that didn't matter. We weren't trying to get anything that would be up to our publishable standards. That's still obviously our job. And I can't emphasize enough the last point. While I'm of course, because of the nature of this panel, focusing on at times when AI was very helpful in producing stories or helping with the reporting process that made these stories possible, it's often not useful at all, or even a time waster or detrimental. And we try to emphasize that to our staff at all points. So that's those are the examples I have to share. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan, who's got more practical uses for, how you make the use of this kind of stuff in your own work in a more accessible way.
Zach, amazing examples. Before moving on to Jonathan, there is great interest from many of our viewers. They are asking, did you use any particular LLMs? I'm not asking you to do anything promotional, but there is always question: Did you do something? Did you build something proprietary, or are you using like tools available for everyone in the public?
Yeah, we mostly use widely available both commercial and open source models for this work. The proprietary aspects, one are the expertise of our reporters. That's the real proprietary aspect. Sometimes we also are obviously working with documents that we exclusively have access to. Not in examples here, but in other cases. We do also build some tooling to help automate this analysis. It's not it's not trivial to have an LLM go through thousands of pages of documents one by one and spit out structured output. Like we've found it useful to build some tools to to create that structure. And we actually, our hope is that we'll be able to open source some of that tooling for the benefit of wider journalism world. But really, the fundamental, like, underlying technology is stuff, our models, and that you're all familiar with and have access to as well.
That's great. Thanks very much, Jonathan.
Let's do it. So on the question of models, just as I get rolling, I feel like that is a great question, but it also is the most it's something that people worry about, but it's so inconsequential because the best model changes all of the time, all the time. Like if you hang out on AI Twitter, it's just like every week now it's something new. And it's just like, oh, the newest Claude model, or oh, the newest GPT, or oh, the newest Gemini that came out of Google, and oh, you have to pay for it, or there's the free. And it's just, I feel like people get really caught up on the details when it's so much of this is just the kind of overall, tools that you can try it out and see which tool works best, and that's the one that ends up being the best for you. So I'm going to burn through hundreds, if not thousands, of slides. I have a million links up at this bit.ly link here. So you can, if you miss something, because I went through it in like half of a second, you can find all of those links up there. I'm going to cover 1 million things that you can do yourself today in your own newsroom that will enable you to use AI, or at least I hope so. But before we get rolling, I talk about AI too much. If you have too much time on your hands and you really want to learn a bunch of stuff, I have a 12-hour series that I recorded last March, so some of it's out of date. But it's Practical AI for Investigative Journalism. It's on YouTube. It covers everything from what works, what doesn't work. There's a whole session about why generative AI should never be used in the realm of journalism, despite the fact that I spend an additional 10 hours talking about how you can use it for journalism. So if you're interested in that stuff, give it a peek. You'll probably learn a little bit of something. So AI kind of comes down to us often, especially if you're not experienced with it, as like a magic gift from the gods, where you're just going to automatically trust everything that comes out of it. I think it was interesting that Zach said, look, sometimes you get output, or oftentimes you get output that is mediocre. And that is something that someone who works with AI all the time is like, of course it's mediocre. Like, it's obvious to us. But if you're someone who is just told by your boss or by the hype machine of the news that AI is what is important for you to learn right now, you're going to be out of a job, you're going to assume that everything that comes out of it is perfect. But in reality, what these tools do and why they are mediocre or why they are wrong so often is they've kind of ingested all of the content that lives on the internet, for better or for worse, runs a little bit of statistical analysis on it, and then it can crank out a wonderful poem about my fat, mean cat, Mulberry. But even though it has read, quote unquote, all of this material, and it can create this poem, that doesn't mean it actually understands anything. Large language models, AI tools, don't understand facts. They don't understand concepts. They only understand statistical probability. And it's just kind of magical that sometimes statistical probability lines up with reality. So we should usually be surprised when AI gets something right, not surprised when it gets something wrong. So you could see this in action on the back end of the OpenAI website, where there's a thing called the playground, where you could type in a bit of text like you're having a chat with ChatGPT, and you can say, I haven't eaten since yesterday, I'm blank. And you say, what comes next? And it says starving is what comes next. And you're like, that makes sense. That makes sense, like everything that comes out of ChatGPT. But the reason why it makes sense is because it says there's a 30% chance that the next thing you're going to say is starving, about a 25% chance you're going to say something like so hungry, or really hungry, or feeling hungry, or just hungry, or not hungry at all. And so what is happening is these tools are picking words which then pick more words, which then pick more words, which turn into sentences, which turn into paragraphs, which turn into, whole novels of mediocre writing. If I have something like this that sounds like fancy text, dearest friend, I dare say I have not partaken of food in ages, I'm positively, and if we were in person, I would say, what's the next word? And every human being would say famished, even though there's a 5% chance you might say ravenous. And so when you look at this text, all GPT is doing is predicting the next word and the next word and the next word and the next word. And because it's picking something that is statistically probable, it is something that most likely is going to make sense. So it's hard to look at this and think about how something that comes out of it might be wrong or how it might be different from actually understanding meaning in the world. There's a secret setting for these LLMs called temperature. And you can kick that temperature up so that instead of picking like the most likely word or the second most likely word or the third most likely word, you're going to say, LLM, get a little crazy. Go down that list of probabilities and pick something near the end or pick something near the middle. And then you get text that looks like this, which is crazy. Money smooth matrix.jpg, instance.item range. It's writing code in there. It's spitting out all sorts of garbage. And the only difference between this and what you're seeing come out of an LLM is this idea of temperature, this idea of, are you picking something that is very probable or are you picking something that is less probable? And this is why when we're having conversations with LLMs, asking them for factual information, this is why we're going to get hallucinations. Because what is statistically probable as the next word in a sentence is not the same thing as what is actually should be next in the sentence, especially when you're dealing with facts. So, how does this shake out in the world of journalism? Well, a lot of people that aren't journalists hate reading. So, like, I teach a bunch of students, and I have no doubt that they are taking papers they have to read or articles they have to read, dumping them into GPT and saying, summarize this for me. So, if I'm a journalist that's writing about law, for example, and I need to write a piece about the California Journalism Preservation Act, 19-page bill, should I drop it into GPT and say, summarize this? Or should I drop it into GPT and say something like, is this about journalism? Probably not. That would be stupid because I can just do this as a human being. It's pretty fast. I can guarantee I'm probably going to have a more correct output than relying on some sort of statistical garbage that is a regurgitation of all of the content on the internet. Additionally, if something goes wrong in an LLM, if it does hallucinate because statistics and reality don't line up, it's terrible for journalists. It's terrible for journalism because the only thing that journalism has is truth. And if you're relying on a machine that doesn't understand truth, that just understands statistical probability, you're going to get in trouble pretty quickly. So what I like to use AI for is the same sort of things that Zach was talking about. When you have to do something in bulk, a situation which I like to call an error resilient task, situations where if something goes wrong, it's not the end of the world. So if I have to write a story about exactly one piece of legislation, if there's a hallucination in there or it miscategorizes something, my article is terrible. But if I have to read 100,000 pieces of legislation, let's say I'm going through every piece of legislation introduced at a state level for the course of a year to see all the bills about anti-trans legislation or pro-journalism legislation or anything like that, if I were to read that myself, I'm sure I would get some of them wrong. So it's probably going to be okay if I have AI read 100,000 things. And if it miscategorizes some of them, it's not going to be a problem. Some examples of this, this is from the pre-LLM times. Washington posted a story where they had to read 130,000 app reviews to see if people were mentioning unwanted sexual behavior. And did they want to read 130,000 app reviews? No. So they just trained an AI model to do it. This isn't the time of GPT. This is the time of like, they got a data scientist and they got a journalist together, and then they just like cranked through a bunch of work, and it was a very big technical lift. But if we fast forward to now, the city, tiny newsroom in New York, They were able to do a piece where they went through about 4,000 stories to see what neighborhoods they were written about, to see whether they were following up with their mandate of evenly covering a lot of different parts of New York City. And notice that it only got about 60 or 70% of those articles labeled. But here's the thing, even if it was wrong 50% of the time, this still gives them a good gut check where they probably wouldn't have been able to read and categorized all 4,000 of those stories themselves, because small newsroom, they don't have the resources for that. So if you want to do something like this, if you have 4,000 of something or 130,000 of something, can you just drag all of those things into the chat box and say, like, tell me all of the ones that are about journalism? No. If you've tried to do this, you've probably had a bad thing happen to you. You actually kind of can on Google AI Studio, but no. What we want to do is we want to use a spreadsheet. We want to stick to the world of Google Sheets. There are all sorts of extensions that connect LLMs from different providers to spreadsheets. My favorite is Claude for Sheets. It works really well, it works really well, and it works really well. All of the other tools are terrible and garbage and break all the time. Claude for Sheets is put out by Anthropic. They're like the other OpenAI that no one uses, but they're wonderful and their chatbot has a lot of personality. It's the same thing as any other chatbot, but it works inside of your spreadsheet. The one thing you'll need to know that seems technical about it is before you can write an AI prompt in the spreadsheet to have it go talk to the chatbot and get a response, you need something called an API key, which is basically like a username and a password kind of smashed together. So just know when you start to set this up yourself, following the links that I give you, when it says API key, don't panic. Just Google like Anthropic API key, and you'll be able to set it up in no time. So what does this look like? Once you install it, it's just like any other spreadsheet formula where I can say, hey, Claude, what color is the sky? It goes off to Anthropic and it comes back and it says the sky appears blue during the daytime. Now, this is not very, very useful, honestly. What is more useful is if you have a one column and then you want to extract information from it and put it in another column. So here I can say, hey, Claude, extract the color of the object from this other column. So it's going to think for a little bit as it goes and talks to the AI, and it's going to say, now the color of the sky is blue. Just like any other formula, you can click and drag and pull it on down. And now we find out that a strawberry is red and a basketball is orange. Although honestly, the basketball color changes when you do this over time and if you do it in different languages. Sometimes it says basketballs don't have a color and sometimes it says they're brown, but that's large language models. So how does this work for us? If I have a spreadsheet that has all the pieces of legislation that came out of Louisiana in 2024, I can have two columns. One, is this about retirement? Is this about employment? And just say, hey, Claude, is this piece of legislation about retirement? Answer yes or no. I get a new column. It says yes. It says no. I filter on it. And there you go. Is it going to be 100% accurate? No, but it's pretty easy to check and kind of use it as a first pass to see if you're reporting on retirement or employment. You can hit yes and then just read those bills and you're probably going to be pretty good to go. If you have unstructured data, something like this, this is probably something that got used a little bit in Zach's example of the travel content, where you want to pull something specific out of it. So it might be someone's name or their email or the state or the location that is mentioned in these articles. In this case, you can just say, hey, Claude, extract the email, extract the name. And instead of you having to go piece by piece by piece by piece through all of this spreadsheet or having an intern do it or being really grouchy that you have to do it, the AI is just magically going to do it for you. I don't speak French very well. I can read like folklore about wells and rivers and little like fairies, but I don't know how to read a journalism article. So what am I going to do if I have a bunch of journalism articles in other languages and I need to somehow understand them or somehow analyze them? I can just use Claude Extract because Claude speaks French way better than me. And I can ask for very specific things that people mention in the article, a one-sentence summary, an English translation, categorize this article for me. And there you go. What was once one column that was just some content from an article has now suddenly been a fully fledged spreadsheet that has all sorts of content in it. And the thing that's great is like we know to not trust this, but it's really hard to say, what do we do when we know we don't trust it? And in this sort of situation, because it's a spreadsheet and because it's not code, I can just send this spreadsheet to someone else and say, check it for me. Check the first 100 rows and see whether it's right and whether it's wrong. And then we have a score. And we know for sources, it's probably 50% accurate. For the English translation, it's 99% accurate. For the article category, it's 85% accurate. And then you can sit down and have a conversation and say, not an LLM is going to hallucinate, so we should never use it, or an LLM is going to save us time, so we should always use it, but rather you have a number. And you can say, is this number good enough that we are going to use AI for this story? There's a new thing in Google Sheets where you can use the AI formula that's actually from Google instead of partnering up with Anthropic. I haven't used it that much. I literally just discovered it today, so I added it in here. Give it a shot. Why not? Now, the biggest issue with generative AI is it's not just chatbots, and trying to figure out what we can do with AI is often the biggest problem of trying to figure out how we should use AI. When we talk about AI, what we're really talking about are AI models. AI models are different. We can just think of them as pieces of software that do stuff. An AI model takes some sort of input and gives some sort of output. Every AI tool will do this. It seems very simplistic, but when you can break it down this way, let's say we have a prompt and we get a response back like ChatGPT. That is a chat model. If we have here's Hugging Face. You probably heard of it if you pay attention to AI news. It's like YouTube for AI models. There's like a million different categories, some of which are better or worse at journalism-y tasks. But the things that we just did a second ago with Claude for Sheets, when we said put this into a category about retirement or not retirement, that is called a document classification model. If we're saying pull out the names or the companies or the emails from these, that is a named entity recognition model. And so by being able to say, I'm looking for named entity recognition, you don't need to know how to program it. You just need to know it as a concept. And then you're often better able to figure out what kind of tools are going to be useful for you. If you've used Google Pinpoint, congratulations, you're a genius. If you haven't, I'm about to blow your mind. So things like entity extraction or semantic or fuzzy matching, which Zach was talking about, Google Pinpoint will do for you. I usually don't trust Google products because they love to shut things down, but Pinpoint is great. Let's say I have a bunch of documents about New York City stuff, and I'm looking for like outdoor dining things about, bike racks or something, and like whether they're fighting between cyclists and outdoor dining. If I go on my computer and search for city bike, that'll show up in one of these documents. If I search for bike racks, it's not going to show up in any of them. But do I want to search for like every permutation of bike, bicycle, city bike, all of these things? Probably not. But if I go to Pinpoint and I upload all of those documents and I just type in bike racks, for example, it will now show me things like bicycle. It will show me things like bike storage. A rack and storage aren't even synonyms, but because it is powered by text embedding, magic stuff that we'll talk about later, it is able to do this sort of searching for me. That's not exact terms. It's just kind of vibes-based search. Beyond that, it also does entity extraction really, really well. If we look at the right-hand side, there's a lot of people and organizations that are pulled out of the documents. So if I'm looking for stuff that mentions the New York City Fire Department, I don't even have to search for it. I just have to click that and it's going to filter for me. There's a piece that came out from the Arizona Mirror. There was a hack where there was a leak of a bunch of basically police training manuals, over 8,500 different PDFs. How are you going to find all the ones that are about Arizona? You can just upload them all to Pinpoint. It'll tag all the ones with Arizona. You click it, and it's just going to magically filter it for you. So instead of trying to think of all the special search terms you're going to look for individually, you can use Pinpoint to do that instead. One thing that I thought was funny though was it mentioned the Washington Commanders as one of the options to click. And I was like, weird that all of these police manuals are mentioning the Washington Commanders football team. You click it and it's just talking about shift commanders, but because it's capitalizing it, the AI is getting confused and thinking it's about football. So is it always right? Definitely not. There's also a new feature that works on Google Pinpoint where if you have forms, you can actually just kind of tag the forms and train the AI. Here's what my form looks like, and it will generate a spreadsheet for you. I don't use that because I do all of this stuff manually, but everyone that does use it absolutely loves it. So I'm going to skip through this one. Even though I think it's fun, because I'm going to get to the important thing that I think is the best, and I'm going to get to questions. But just very quickly, if you're searching for something like bike racks or turkey, like what is actually the best match for turkey? If I search for turkey, should it give me Istanbul? Should it give me Eric Adams? Should it give me poultry? Like every word is less and less and less related to turkey. But like maybe when I search for the word turkey, instead of only showing me matches, it should be like, here's all of your documents just ranked as to how close to turkey they are. So if I scroll halfway down, it'll get me things about poultry maybe. But if I stay up near the top, it'll get me some nice Eric Adams tidbits. Again, there's a nice Google thing, plugs into Sheets called Semantic Reactor. What you can do is this is a list of emergency room admissions where people like fell down or burned themselves on something or whatever. And if you jump through a bunch of hoops with this tool, you can search for things like telephone fire, and it will rank high things that don't say the word telephone or the word fire, but they might have burn and phone on them. Or if you search for surfboard, nothing in there mentions the word surfboard, but like skateboards semantically are kind of close to skateboard. Skateboards and surfboards are kind of semantically similar. So it's like, yeah, skateboards, it's all the same. It's close enough. And if you search for wild animals, it will show you stuffed animals. So again, AI, not always perfect. Now, the best thing and the easiest thing that you can do as a journalist is transcribe things, whether that's your own meeting notes or conversations or city council meetings or anything like that that happens on YouTube. You use a speech recognition model for that. There's actually one that was released by OpenAI, which is notorious for keeping things private and secret, despite the fact that open is in their name. But they released something called Whisper that anyone can use. They released it from a technical perspective, but because everyone can use it and it was very open, people were able to take it and build tools on top of it. So I highly, 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 highly recommend the tool on the left, which is called Mac Whisper. It does fantastic, fantastic transcription things for you. When you use it, you can use it for free with like weaker models that don't do as good of a job, but are maybe faster. There's all this stuff that you don't need to know about, but basically you can also give this guy $50 once or $25 as a journalist. And then you can run this AI model on your own machine for free forever. So if you are the person who currently has the Otter note taker hanging out here, you do not need the Otter note taker anymore. All you need is Whisper. You do not have to spend Otter money anymore. Whisper, you buy it once, and then you run that model locally, more secure, all of that. It's a delight. I took a hour and 15-minute city council meeting. You just plug in the URL into Whisper. You wait like 5 minutes. It gives you a transcript. It gives you timestamps on the transcript. It has built-in AI stuff, so I can click a button and it says, give me the key points in this transcript. Sends it off to OpenAI, asks for the key points. Those key points come right back. Again, I don't speak French, but I took this French city council meeting and I said, give me a summary in English. And it gives me a summary in English. It's perfect and beautiful and amazing. It'll also split up speakers and things like that. Whisper is not ideal though. There's a really good example of hospitals attempting to use Whisper to do transcription and it hallucinating all kind of nonsense in these transcripts. And then they delete the original audio file, which is never ideal because then you can't go back and fact check. So instead of thinking about AI as just like one big umbrella of a million things, you might start to think about it as a ton of tiny little models that each do something different. If you want to know a million more things, 12 hours of your life can be spent watching this. But if not, you can just head on to bit.ly, Soma, NYFWA, and you can find all the links, all of the stories, all of the tools, all of the everything. And if you have questions, just drop me an email because I am always around.
Amazing. Thanks, Jonathan. Great recommendations. I bet that many will find them extremely useful. Already, I actually I've taken some notes because I'm going to implement some of these. Let's move on to questions from our audience. And if I may, to organize this discussion, if anyone wants to ask a question, can they please go on reactions, click the reactions button and hit to raise their hand, because this way it's easier for me to see them and ask them to take the question. I see a question coming from the chat, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's... Martika is asking, how do I find AI Twitter? What's the hashtag for that?
Yeah, so what I'd recommend doing is just follow Simon Willison. Honestly, AI Twitter's pretty toxic. I will drop a link into the chat. He's kind of like the kingpin of approachable AI things and kind of journalism AI things sometimes. And he is always on top of all of the new releases that come out, links, demos, and things like that. So instead of dealing with like the toxic Musk world of AI bros, stick with Simon. He's probably your best bet.
Great. Next question. It's a little awkward the way we're doing things because we have an audience, but the audience follows. We're not in a live room where it's easy to see everyone. Greg Miles has a question. Greg, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, hi, Michael. Yeah, I'll do this verbally. This could be for Zach and Jonathan. I want to ask, you mentioned that example of Tulsi Gabbard, where you were, tracking down hundreds of different interviews that she'd done on Fox and other networks. And I wanted to ask you, how accurate, was the AI 100% accurate, number one, in transcribing it? But then you also said that I think you also taught it so that it could find times that was actually she was speaking and not just referred to, right? And I want to ask you in both cases how accurate the AI was.
Highly accurate. It's one of those cases where I'd call it like a safe use, like Jonathan was talking about, where like the risk is, since we were anything we would be quoting, we were going back all the way to the original video to verify it. So the real risk was just that we would be missing something, like because the transcription was inaccurate, or the model didn't flag a passage that was relevant to our interest. Now that depending on the story, could be really quite risky. In this case, it was less so because we were trying to compile like the best choicest examples of her references to Syria, Russia, deep state, etc. And there were voluminous examples, so it didn't matter if we missed a few. We didn't perform an accuracy check on the entire transcription, so I can't tell you it was 98%. But we were using the model that Jonathan was singing the praises of, and certainly find the same thing, that it's very accurate.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I think for a lot of these things, it's just a question of, is it good enough? Because it's never going to be 100, and it's it's a lot of just filtering through incredibly large amounts of data, and like you're not going to watch all of those, hours and hours and hours and hours of video. So if it saves you, a little bit of time and cuts out some clips that are useful enough for you, it's fantastic.
Great, thank you.
There is a question. Zach, I didn't catch you how Claude checks the accuracy of its findings. Could you repeat that, please, from someone in the audience?
Well, it's possibly a question for Jonathan, who was made specific reference to Claude, but I mean, regardless of whether you're talking about Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, et cetera, it does not check the accuracy of its findings. So we did the checking ourselves. I mean, I think Jonathan made it, illustrated it really well. What we're talking about is probabilistic technology that's trying to predict what's the most likely right answer. But even right, I put right in quotation marks because it's not really trying to get it right so much as just finish your sentence. So again, we use it as a starting point, often, to help filter down from, a huge data set to, a more reasonable amount that we can then do the plain old, old-fashioned traditional work of verifying ourselves.
Yeah, and those check marks there are just you sending someone and saying, hey, check whether this is right or not. It's all manual. And I think that the idea that AI does things magically itself is think of it, I mean, I guess it's kind of played out and not as accurate anymore, but like it's an intern that is well-meaning. It will do a lot of work, but it doesn't ever think about whether it's doing something right or not. And even if you say, cite sources or tell me where you got this information from, it will also make that up. It like for a long time, I would give a presentation about how if you asked where I got my master's degree from, it would say I got my master's degree from the Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism, because there are a lot of pages on the internet that have my name, master's degree, and Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism on them. But I don't even have a master's degree. So it was just making things up, even though it would be able to cite a source. The source was not actually in support of what it was saying.
Very interesting. Larry? Larry, we cannot hear you. Oh.
Hi. Hi, Zach. Hi, Jonathan. I'm glad you guys could finally make it here and do this presentation. I wanted to ask Zach, how did you actually do those transcriptions? Did you have to like tape it on your phone and then use a file, send the file and put that in AI? I mean, how did you actually put it into the AI? Was it a audio file or was it a written file?
These were video files that we extracted the audio track from. And then in this particular case, we were using APIs to do this programmatically because we were talking about such a huge number of files. But basically that's just automating what you could do. You could definitely take a video file or individual video file or audio file and upload it to any of the tools Jonathan was talking about, and I think MacWhisper being a good one because it's fast, cheap, and secure, and can work right on your laptop. And get the same result. The only difference is that, like, if you have to do it 1,000 times, it helps to have some code to automate that part of the process.
Well,
Although I was also not familiar with the equals AI Google Sheets function, which I immediately went to check if I had access, and could be a way to do. I mean, it's definitely the way to automate at least a certain amount of that I mean, it might not be the best use for transcription, but certainly other versions of what we were talking about.
So do you take that file, say it's like a voice memo on your phone, do you stick that into a chat GPT type of thing? And if so, how do you do that? I mean, how do you transfer it?
Well, if that were, yeah, I think that's a totally viable way to do it, and you'd be hitting the share button the way you might to email the file to yourself, or or send it, upload it to your laptop or something. But instead of that, you could go find if you have ChatGPT on your phone, find the ChatGPT button on the share sheet. I'm thinking of an iPhone here, but I think the same would be true on Android. And it'll upload the file right there. You could, then you have to give it instructions. Create a transcript of this audio file, and that's a pretty good way. I mean, actually, I should say, since I'm thinking about the phone right now, both your iPhone and most latest Android phones will do transcription for you in the voice notes app in iOS, and similar. I'm less familiar with Android, but similar Android apps. So you could even skip the uploading it to ChatGPT part of or Gemini or whatever part of what I was just saying, and ask your phone to do the transcription.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Great. Any other questions from the audience? It doesn't seem to be so. Then perhaps one last question from me. That's for both of you guys if you have any recommendations. But many journalists these days, they want to get their hands dirty, and besides the available LLM models, they want to also try themselves, like do some coding. Do you think in terms of coding languages that Python or R would be more useful for people to experiment and do stuff? That's the first question. And the second question is, I've tried, like, I'm the head of data and benchmarking for my organization, and I've noticed that not all models are just as accurate when it comes to reading like tables and charts and other things that they're much more like image driven than like simple text. Do you have any recommendations as to best LLM models attached to a good OCR?
The second question is something I will fight people to death about, because I do not believe you should be feeding tabular data to an LLM, because what those LLMs do is they are generating probabilistic, here's what I feel like the next number is going to be. And I think that it's fine for text, for transcripts, or for doing OCR on a written document. Because if some words are kind of off, it's not a big deal. But for tabular data, you're summing columns and things like that. And if something is off, then it's really bad. And I've actually been working on a tool called Natural PDF. I will throw a link in the chat if anyone is a Python person. That pretty much combines some of the layout detection and analysis algorithms with traditional tools that you use to extract data from PDFs, like PDF Plumber. So if anyone's a Python person that likes to extract data from there. But I will also find my favorite tweets about how you cannot use LLMs in order to extract data from PDFs, even though they give you wonderful, beautiful output. They always process it as images, and it's tragic. It's tragic. But everyone is so excited about it. So I'm fighting an uphill battle about this.
Perfect. And on the coding question, I bet that since you're doing things in Python, you would recommend Python as well.
I feel like Python is a very default kind of language for stuff. I heard people recently who were talking about how R is getting better at these things. But by default, when these models are released or like new things are happening, they're always runnable in Python immediately. If you are an R person, and you want to just like interact with an LLM from your own computer, R can be fine. But most of the time, if you want to like hang out on the cutting edge or whatever, Python's probably the way to do it.